Looking at all the teams that potentially go 2-0, I think the only other team, if they went 2-0, that would have an argument for a better 2-0 start would be the Dolphins, just given that they beat the Patriots in New England and then beat the Bills, who were the reigning AFC champs. Like they started 2-0. They took out two teams in their division who I think both teams, the Bills are viewed as a lock and the Patriots are viewed as like a bounce back team. Like that's doesn't you can't feel much better if you're that franchise. If the Raiders start the season beating the Ravens and beating the Steelers, two teams that combined for like Steelers, what they win 12 or 13 games last year. The Ravens won 11. I mean, that's a lot of wins between the two of them, and they're both viewed as playoff teams. And you beat them both, especially beating Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh off a short week. Now they did get pretty beat up. Turns out Mariota hurt his quad on the run, like he's out. I don't, they lost their starting guard. Ndakwe's out, with a hamstring. Incognito. It'd be like, okay, we lost a guard, but Incognito comes back. We can kind of, mix and match. Incognito looks like still going to be out. I know he didn't practice as of recording this yesterday. I don't know if he practiced today. So it's like they'd be doing this without, some pretty impactful players. Pittsburgh's defense, to me, I don't know, Pittsburgh's defense, are they going to be the best defense in the league? It's hard to, the Bills, it was just a weird game. Maybe they are. If Derek can go on the road and beat an elite, we just know they're going to be one of the better defenses. And Leatherwood, TJ Watt, like that's going to be a tough matchup. It'd be an incredible performance by the offense, whether it was like we slowed the game down, we ran the ball with Jacobs, who was also banged up. I mean, the Raiders are pretty banged up right now.
Yeah. Maybe it's the kind of game they can. But Pittsburgh, Ben, how explosive are they really going to be on offense anyway? Najee, I would imagine they'll try to get him going because he did not have a great game against Buffalo.
Didn't really need him.
Didn't need him. But I think if the Raiders are 2-0, given what you said, like where would they be? Not that this is, what I'm about to say, it's not like we talk about it every week, but if I said put together your NFL power rankings, because beating the Steelers on the road to me falls in a category of a game where, and you could argue this about the Ravens too, it doesn't really matter all that much how it looks, right? Like if you beat them on the road and you've beaten now the Ravens and the Steelers, playoff team, like playoff franchises. Now, whether or not Pittsburgh's a playoff team this year, we'll see. I wouldn't, be shocked if they had a year like last year, and maybe the Ravens are going to have a season from hell. Who knows? Very early. But if you, where would they'd be? They'd have to be a top. Where would they be power ranking wise? If you had to put power rankings
7
together?
teams, yeah. I mean, they'd be up there.
Part of that obviously depends on what other teams do. I mean, it's going to be hard for just.
I think part of it would be like if the Steelers or the Packers bounce back, you'd just be like, well, the Packers big picture are better. You could argue it, but my point is like we'd be talking. You start 2-0 with those two wins. Like this is one of those. Well, now you're setting yourself up again to have a good start. Are you starting 8-3? And it's like, are you going to crumble down the stretch? Because that's what's happened the last 2 years, where they have been in the position to get a wild card, like after Halloween, like in November, and then all of a sudden, by the time we get to mid-December, we're like, oh, they're not looking good. It's their problem really hasn't been starting. They've started pretty well the last couple of years under Gruden. It's can they sustain it? Because, but if you go 2-0 with those two wins, you'd be in pretty good shape. The problem, a little bit like the NFC West, I do think the AFC West is just those games are just hard. You could play well and go 3-3 in the division, right? And then just one thing is going to be fascinating at the end of the year. I was thinking about this. If you were just having a conversation with someone, do you think the extra game makes it harder or easier to get in the playoff? You'd be like, well, you got a little margin for error, right? You got another game. I actually think it's gotten harder because if you're a 10-6 team, right, that means you're probably pretty good. Well, if I just gave you an extra game, more than likely you're going to be an 11-6 team, right? It's the teams that actually like the Bears last year, they were 8-8 or sometimes 9-7 teams. You're like, I don't think that team's that good. Well, more than likely they would lose that game and be 9-8, right? Or they would lose that game and be 8-9 if they were 8-8. Or I think the teams that have a little more talent, I actually think you're probably more likely you need that extra win. So that swing game, instead of being a 10, it turns into 11. Last year, it took 11 to get in the AFC playoffs. It seems probably inconceivable that it would take 12 to get in, but like even 11 is hard to get to, right? There's a big difference now there will be between 10-7 and what would it be? 11-6. Like 11-6 would
Mhm.
feel like a really good record.
Yeah.
We're 10-7. There'll probably be some teams that maybe miss the playoffs at 10-7. You're like, yeah, it feels right. I don't think they were a playoff team, but maybe they started fast and like got off to like a 3-0 start, so had a little buffer.
Well, but what happens?
Do you
Your
agree with
buffer
that?
disappears.
Do you think that extra game makes it easier or more difficult? I just thought about this on edibles a couple nights ago.
That's a good question because I think like in theory, the more games you play, the bad teams should fall further back and create more
Yeah.
separation for the medium to medium plus teams.
The Mahomes teams, the Brady Belichick's teams, the more games you give them, the more likely
I
they're
think
going to win.
isn't it just similar to saying what's harder? Where is it harder to get an upset in a 3-game baseball series or a 7-game series?
Yeah.
The more games you play, the more sample size you get, the more the good teams should be better.
Dikembe
Yeah.
Mutombo holding up the ball.
Dikembe Mutombo, exactly. But to what you just said about the buffer can go away really quick. The one we always reference is the Niners Super Bowl year. They were 9-0, right? And they didn't. It's not like they just started losing games. They just stopped winning all of them, and their buffer almost disappeared completely. And for the Raiders, it's like you go, okay, if you had started the season and looked at the schedule, you wouldn't say, you got to win at the Steelers. And they don't have to win at the Steelers. It's a 17-week season. You don't have to win necessarily. But Miami comes in next. We'll see what Miami does against Buffalo. I don't expect them to win. I honestly don't think they should have beat the Patriots. But what if they did? What if they're 2-0 coming in? Then you look at that game a little bit differently.
But
then you
even
play the
win or
Chargers.
lose with Miami, we just know they are a tough team to play, right? They play good defense. They're physical. Like they're a
For
challenging
sure. I'm
opponent.
just saying if you lose to Pittsburgh, now you're going to play a difficult game the next week. You'll probably be favored depending on how it looks and what they've done against Buffalo. But you lose that game, now you're 1-2 and you're playing the Chargers the next week.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of this. Is you can this isn't college football. Most of the games are losable games.
Where's that Charger game?
Not in San Diego, not in Carson, but in LA.
So the Raiders will claim it's a home game for them, which
Well,
I mean, it'd probably be a lot of silver and black, right?
Yeah.